Hello there, friends, and welcome back to the New Blocks, the cryptocurrency podcast here on Zyori TV. Andrew and Kevin back again, reporting for another rousing edition of Deep Blockchain Cryptocurrency Conversation. Today, we're talking about Ethereum, the other big one, the little buddy right there next to Bitcoin that's doing all sorts of interesting stuff around the world. Kevin, welcome back, buddy. How are you? You ready to talk about your little buddy today?
Oh, Ethereum's my favorite. I've been waiting for this episode for a little while. I'm sporting my Ethereum shirt again.
Nice.
Try to keep my shirts relevant. Try to keep them,
Fashion game on point.
Yeah, I work at a clothing company and, wear a bunch of Ethereum and crypto shirts that are
good.
unrelated.
That's good.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. This is going to be sort of the next step down the rabbit hole. So looking forward to it.
We've laid down the foundation. This is episode 5. So if somehow this is the first one you're watching, I definitely recommend going back, catching some of the earlier ones, then revisiting episode 5 here, because this assumes that you've already digested a little bit of that foundational groundwork that we laid down to try to understand some of this new cutting edge and complicated technology. But in terms of Ethereum, this one is really exciting because it's almost like evolution number 2 in my mind. Like Bitcoin was the first one. It was novel, it was innovative, but because it was the first one, it has some limitations, right? It kind of is what it is, and it exists in that pure form, which is sort of its greatest strength and greatest weakness in some ways. Ethereum, a lot more dynamic, and it's almost like a platform that has allowed developers to build this whole network of decentralized apps on top of it, which is fundamentally really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's the difference between the calculator and the computer. So whereas Bitcoin, you have the ability to send and receive money. You can tally balances. You can get like basic information from the underlying blockchain, but there isn't a ton that it can actually do. All it can really do is be its own money. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ethereum is a completely different design. Ethereum is essentially of a virtual computer. So in computer science terms, it's called a Turing complete virtual computer. And that just means that it is a cloud-based computer or an internet-based computer. It is a single symbolic computer that exists and runs on tens of thousands of physical computers. And so every individual physical computer that's running it, they're all running the exact same code as if they were all the exact same computer.
Interesting. And that should be a little more relatable now in our modern age. This idea of virtual machines, cloud computing. I'm on a computer that's giving me access to another computer that doesn't physically exist the same way, the PCs that we're sitting at right now do. But maybe we need to go back to the starting point. What's the beginning for Ethereum? Because it did come along after Bitcoin was created, right? There was a little bit of a lag period there. Ethereum was not an early mover the same way Bitcoin was.
Yeah, exactly. So Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin. The network started in 2009. And about 2 years later, a software engineer named Vitalik Buterin released his own white paper talking about what he called a smart contract and decentralized application platform. And what that means, he sort of outlined this idea of an alternative blockchain that is a lot more flexible, allows you to do a lot more with it. So he introduced this white paper, and there was some other projects going on in crypto at the time, but not a lot of projects that were as ambitious as that. There was a lot of other copycats of Bitcoin, whereas Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash, like the different variations of Bitcoin, all of these different individual monies. Mm-hmm. But this was the first time that there was actually like a level up from what had been going on before.
Yeah, it's like the next round of innovation. In some ways, the way you're describing that, to me, I hear they Valvified it. They went, wow, you guys made some pretty cool hats. That's pretty neat. Now, what if we made a platform where people could upload their hats? We get a little cut of everything they upload, but then they get to profit. Then that creates this whole new marketplace that's born based on the platform, the sandbox that we've put out there to let the users run wild with.
Yeah, exactly. And the difference here is that Ethereum has what's called the Ethereum Foundation. It's sort of the nonprofit org that exists to sort of make decisions and write the core code for Ethereum and make improvements to it, but they don't own it the way that Valve owns Steam.
Right.
There isn't a single owner similar to with Bitcoin. There's no sort of like Satoshi doesn't have more right than anyone else to say what Bitcoin should do next.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime that the Ethereum Foundation proposes changes, the entire network gets to decide if they want to actually use that change or use the existing code, which is what happened when Ethereum Classic forked off of Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. So what's the biggest benefit to this new sandbox we've got here? We've got this foundation. So what are we able to build on top of this foundation? Like, what kind of apps are we talking about here?
Yeah. So in our last or a couple episodes ago, when we were talking about the blockchain, one thing that the blockchain is, if you think about it in sort of a conceptual space, it's a trust machine. So you put decentralization into it and trust comes out of it. And so Ethereum is a more generalizable trust machine. So it's not just that you can trust the money. You can write these applications. You can do anything that you would on a regular computer. And so the way that works is any website you've ever been on runs JavaScript in the background. There's a flavor of JavaScript that you can write for Ethereum, and so that code will run on the entire network. And so when we refer to the computer, the like virtual computer in Ethereum, it's called the Ethereum Virtual Machine, and so it's this computer that we can write applications for.
Okay. So does this sort of function as like a public database of sorts? Is that a fair analogy?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a public database with a computer surrounding it, whereas like Bitcoin had a ledger, had a database in a sense that like you had all the values of who owned what, but now it's a database that is connected to a more flexible programming language. So right off the bat, people now have the ability to do anything that they want on this new blockchain. So the next logical step for people was to create their own cryptocurrencies on top of Ethereum. So there's a standard where essentially you can create any variation of a coin that you would want on Ethereum. And I think that sort of was like the first use case that people really thought of. It was like, okay, we understand cryptocurrencies. Like, let's go make more cryptocurrencies on top of this new virtual machine.
Right. So this virtual machine basically gave us the framework to say, hey, here is a base kind of default version of what a cryptocurrency coin could look like, a token, if you will. Then that gave us sort of the more regular users without really deep computer science knowledge of how to create a sandbox like this, the ability to make Kevin coin or like Dogecoin, for example, these altcoins that aren't their own cryptocurrency the same way Bitcoin is. They exist within the Ethereum framework, but they are their own standalone coin.
Yep.
Within that
with their own
system. Yeah.
With their own, supply caps, their own rules around the way they work. And so like
it's like a degree of standardization, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. And so
in a good
essentially,
way.
Yeah. And like the thing to understand about Ethereum as a network, it differs from Bitcoin in that Bitcoin is both the name of the network, the blockchain, and the asset, the actual money.
Right.
In Ethereum, you have Ethereum, the network, and Ether gas, which is like the thing that Ether or ETH is the money that exists on top of Ethereum. And this idea of Ether as gas is the way that you pay to run a program on the Ethereum virtual machine is you send some money, some Ether, to the miners to have them, do the work of running your code on their machine. So if I want to send you money, I have to send a small amount of Ether to miners to have them actually, run my transaction, or any other function you would do. If I want to create a new currency, I need to push some code to Ethereum. I'm going to pay a little bit of gas in Ether.
Okay, so that part is similar to Bitcoin then, where anytime you want to do a transaction on the network, you have to pay some additional transaction fee, as we've been calling it, for the miners to verify that and push it into the ledger and guarantee that, hey, this is a legit transaction, the money actually moved from here to here, whatever. But I guess in the case of Ethereum, we have even more flexibility. Going back to this public database type idea, it's so much more than just transactions of my wallet to your wallet. It can be data points for games or applications or like anything that you'd run in this network where you're moving data in and out of the blockchain, which in this case functions as just a public database. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And so the specific way that these applications run, the code that lives on Ethereum is in what are called smart contracts. So you'll hear this term a lot in the crypto space. A smart contract is just literally any sort of script that
it's just code. It's just computer.
It's just code. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And the difference here is that on a tip when I'm writing code for a typical application, I have the ability to create text, numbers, basic data types. With Ethereum, it kind of gives it being on a trust machine, on a blockchain, gives that code the ability to essentially like accrue value or be scarce, like digital asset scarcity. Is this idea that Bitcoin introduced? It's the first time we've ever had anything that's purely digital and scarce. And so similarly, Ethereum allows you to create digital asset scarcity in whatever context that is, whether it's a cryptocurrency or an in-game item where there's only 5 of them,
right,
or something like that.
It's sort of the layman's term that I put on it was the intangible tangible. This idea of a digital thing that exists as a unique data point in virtual space. This is still a really deep concept that I'm sure a lot of you out there are struggling to wrap your brains around, and that's okay. It's very new. It's very meta. It's hard to conceptualize, but this idea of there's 100 Xiori coin tokens, and if I give one to you, we can verify that is the same one that's moving around in the supply. It's not being duplicated. It's not being multiplied. It's the same digital version of I have this cup. I'm handing you the cup. Once I don't have it anymore, it's out of my possession. It's one thing that's moving from person to person.
And in a gaming sense, games prior to the blockchain, they would sort of have their own economies and things. You think of something like World of Warcraft, like gold in WoW did actually accrue real world value. But it's interesting because most other games, that's not really the case. Like the WoW developers could theoretically just print themselves like trillions of dollars worth of WoW gold, right, and just like sell it on the marketplace. And so like the difference between something like WoW and one of these like new in-game currencies that you could create in Ethereum is that once the code goes out to create this new currency, that's it. Like there's you have the rules that say you either can print new money or you can't, and then like everything from that point on is what it is. So
okay, so that's the beauty of the decentralized part. In the case of WoW, the end result functions similarly, but the difference is it's completely centralized and owned by Blizzard, who own World of Warcraft. They hold all the cards and they get to make all the decisions. In this case, once the smart contract's out there, it's the Satoshi Nakamoto analogy again. The person that wrote the smart contract has no more claim than anyone else. It's whatever is in the code is now the rule of law, essentially, within that system.
Yep, exactly. And there is like a caveat here, if the rule of the code that is in there, it says that like this particular address, this person has the ability to like print more, then, that's the same. But if you sort of like remove that person from the equation, or like, it's the person that it's like originally this code is written for, can prove that they like burned that account and they've lost the ability to do that again, then it's, totally out there in the open, and nothing you
Right.
can do.
I guess the only difference in the case of the smart contract is that the code is publicly viewable, right? So if you're committing to a transaction on a smart contract, in theory, you could look at it, digest it, and go, okay, cool. There's no loopholes here where one person gets to just pull from the supply or something like that. Obviously, it's not that easy in practice. You have to be able to read the code and understand what the code means. But in theory, it's all publicly out there so that if we all could understand it, we could make really informed decisions compared to our centralized world that revolves around marketing a lot of the time.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you've, maybe heard about Ethereum from, a few years ago,
Crypto kitties.
Hey, the graphics card market is just trashed. Everything. You likely heard of like all of these projects that were coming out in 2017, and they were releasing their own cryptocurrency and using that as a fundraising mechanism. So the term was ICO, or initial coin offering. So a project would say, hey, here's $100,000 new coins. If you want to buy them, you can, but like you'll get a stake and a share in the project that I'm working on that's going to decentralize
web browsers.
Or Dentacoin was, somehow it's going to revolutionize dentists or something. It was this big boom of all of these projects. Just hundreds of them were out there, and everyone was claiming to, decentralize the world. And as with the .com bubble, as with these other sort of like technological growth periods, there was this huge spike. All of the price of Ether, the price of a bunch of these currencies were shooting up. People were jumping in, and then it just crashed because you can only sell a dream for so long before reality kind of hits. And as soon as it turned downward, it just crashed right down. It was beginning of 2018. It was kind of falling apart.
Yeah, and of course, the term ICO, it's a play on a term from the traditional financial markets, IPO, initial public offering. When a company goes public, opens up shares to regular consumers to buy in on a stock exchange, a company going onto the stock market, that's called doing an IPO. So an ICO is supposed to be the crypto decentralized version of that, where we're launching this project or quote company in air quotes by selling these tokens that crowdfund the whole thing. It was an interesting time to be part of crypto because it was a really good example of how innovation is sometimes a little bit messy. We have these breakthroughs in technology. We don't quite understand the full limits of it, how to calibrate it exactly. It opens up this situation where bad actors come in, people that are creating these very appealing scams that look very legitimate but really have no intention of ever building the thing that they claim they're raising money for. There were some good ones. There were some ICOs that raised a lot of money and have built some apps that are still in development. And, there are decentralized web browsers that you can install right now to watch this podcast on if you wanted to. But there were unfortunately also a lot of ICO scams, and the number moves around a lot. But I think a lot of the ICOs ended up going bust, for lack of a better term, and never really produced anything close to the final vision that they were talking about. I mean, we saw a ton of them in esports, Kevin, a staggering amount of tokens that were somehow going to revolutionize the system. It's a streaming platform, a tournament hosting platform, and fan engagement all combined in one. It never really made any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that was the case. You give people the ability to print free money, and you're going to attract all ends of the spectrum. So there was everything there. Like you said, very few projects really survived from that. You can think of it similar to the .com bubble when
actually that's really a good parallel.
When there was like 15 different search engines, at the time.
You remember Dogpile?
Yep, I remember Alta Vista. I mean, some of them still exist today, and like tried to do other stuff like Yahoo with news and other side projects. But like,
they're still going. They're still hemorrhaging money, but there's no end in sight.
Yeah. So at the end of the ICO boom, it was like January of 2018. price of Ether shot up to like $1,100 or something, and it had been less than 100 for a long time. And so after that point, investors kind of left. A lot of people kind of weren't really interested anymore. A lot of people buying in at the top, not being able to sell in time. I mean, when a market crashes like that, it happens in like a couple days. Like it's even less.
Well, we saw it with GameStop, how quickly the pump and dump cycle completes, right? Up to the moon, and then before long, the moon is nowhere in sight. And a lot of these ICOs followed a very similar trajectory. When the hype is building, the price is building, and it creates this feedback loop where the hype becomes overwhelming. But inevitably, if you can't live up to the hype, you're setting yourself up for a pretty substantial crash at some point.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so like the plus side is it did actually attract a decent amount of capital to some serious projects that continued working. And in general, it kind of like brought a lot of attention to the space. That was around the time when I got involved, when I started learning about a lot of this. And so the people that were a little more serious about it, that had already been in the space for a while and were building projects, they spent the last 3 or so years continuing to build actually meaningful and interesting projects. And so the cliffhanger I'm going to leave this episode on is that since the beginning of 2018, there has been this sort of like ecosystem that has evolved out of Ethereum. And it's referred to now as DeFi, stands for decentralized finance, which is a very generalized term, but it's essentially this alternative financial system that exists now, and it's built entirely on Ethereum. And it's built, I shouldn't say entirely, there are other projects that are doing this, but what's interesting right now seems to still exist sort of on Ethereum, at least to me. I like some of the old 2018 coins like Tron and like EOS, whatever. They still exist, and there's still stuff happening there. But like, it's like anything else, right? As soon as Facebook started getting popular, network effect, it brings everyone in, and it becomes the sort of like de facto New York Square.
The laggards get a hold of it.
To be.
Yeah.
So I think now's probably a good time to get into the lightning round.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to throw out about DeFi, teasing for future episodes, this is a really new thing in crypto. One of the cool things about DeFi, it's taking the tools we have in the fiat traditional banking system that we're used to, like credit, loaning, interest, all these kind of things, and trying to adapt them into the cryptocurrency ecosystem in a way that they have meaningful value for all of the users. So a really cool concept, but one that merits its own episode. So not going to go too deep here, but yeah, buddy, let's do some lightning round questions. Is Ethereum the one that is screwing up my graphics cards prices? As a gamer, I have so many people in my network upset that they can't get the new GPUs, and I hear about mining. We talked about how Bitcoin
my logo on my shirt
has these ASICs, these special processors. It's got to be this one, right? Are these the guys screwing up my gaming?
It's this one. The difference in when Ethereum, the white paper came out, one of the differences that Vitalik and sort of the Ethereum community decided is that Bitcoin went this route of hardware that became very specialized to mining Bitcoin. So these, like, they're called ASIC miners. So it's these like very specific devices that you need to buy to mine Bitcoin. On Ethereum, they wanted to retain this idea of being more decentralized, like valuing the ability for random people, you and I, if we wanted to be able to go to the store, get a graphics card, and like actually mine Ethereum. And so, now years later, as the adoption has continued, the graphics card market has just been totally taken over by Ethereum miners.
You hate to see it because it started out as like, hey, now the common man can be a part of this thing. Just use your GPU. And I mean, I've done some GPU mining on our extra production computers back in the day when they were just sitting there dormant. And that is really cool. But yeah, when it really catches on, it has this sort of counterintuitive aspect of, crap, now the demand for graphics cards is way too high. I guess good if you're a NVIDIA stockholder, but outside of that, it's brutal.
I just saw a headline recently. I didn't read much into it yet. Wasn't Nvidia now starting to like make some of their maybe older graphics cards resistant to mining or something like that?
They might be. I would totally believe it. I've read a fair amount that these big graphics cards companies don't really like what's happening in terms of their hardware being so useful for mining because it's not in line with their core audience, and ultimately it's their core customers that are suffering and irritated because of this. So it's a tricky thing for them to navigate because that you're still pretty happy that your product's moving off the shelves, right? But now you got to find a way to make sure you get the product into the hands. Like, how do you give priority to the people that are going to use your product the way it was intended? I think that's a tricky system to figure out.
Yeah, so luckily there's a silver lining. The mining, proof of work mining on Ethereum, it has a shelf life at this point. Ethereum 2.0 is this multi-phased process toward a set of improvements to Ethereum, and one of those is to switch the underlying consensus mechanism, the way that the blockchain generates consensus, to from a system called proof of work, burn electricity, you have miners, to a system called proof of stake. And so proof of stake doesn't need to burn electricity to generate consensus. We'll probably do a full episode on sort of the difference there, but essentially no more need to light the planet on fire, make gamers angry, and we can kind of like similarly just continue to innovate, make things better.
Gotcha. Very good.
Yep. So there's this concept of gas I was talking about earlier. What happens if, I'm trying to use Ethereum, I want to send you money, and what if I don't use enough gas? Or how do I sort of like tell my wallet to use what amount of gas? How does this work?
This is a good one because for Bitcoin, the transaction fees are a little more straightforward conceptually. You just have to pay. Basically, you're paying the network to manage your transaction fees. It's not that different on Ethereum, except there's another variable we have to deal with. In the real world, you have a car, right? Your car gets a certain amount of gas mileage, and that's independent from the price of the gas that you purchase to put into your car. Right. So in Ethereum, we have these two things. There's gas where you can say, I want to pay X amount of gas for this transaction. And then I'm willing to pay up to this price for the gas that's used to fuel this transaction. So there's two variables you have to figure out. The price of the gas is generally handled for you. Pretty much any Ethereum wallet you have will give you a general guesstimate of what the market's at and then give you a recommendation that's slightly above the average to guarantee that you get a bid, so to speak, in the network. If you end up not putting enough gas in your engine to get your transaction through, basically your transaction will fail and you lose your gas. So you have the benefit of partial data won't make it into the blockchain, but you will be penalized for that by having to forfeit the gas that you've already put forward. So there are some protections there. If you bid on a very low value for the gas, let's say the going rate for gas is $1 a gallon, and you say, I'm willing to pay 50 cents. Your transaction is going to sit there similar to a limit order on the stock market until the gas prices reach 50 cents. So you might be waiting a day, a month, a year, or infinity if gas prices never go that low. So there are some protections there to make sure you're not getting partial data uploaded, but you got to be a little careful. That's one of the incentives they build into the network to make sure the data integrity is where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to prevent spam on the network. If every single thing that's happening requires capital money to do, then people aren't really, going to try to go spam the network with transactions when they're just burning their money.
Yeah, that's a big incentive against.
It's one thing that right now with all of what's going on in DeFi and sort of like the new market cycle that we're in, the price of ETH is going up. The price of all crypto is sort of going up. There is a lot of demand for block space on the Ethereum network to get your transaction in to use the Ethereum network. So the price of gas right now is astronomically high. I'm talking like almost $100 to send money to someone or to like do something somewhat interesting on the Ethereum network. That might be a little high of an example for sending money. But yeah, it's something like $20 is the most recent that I saw, maybe more, just to send money.
Cost prohibitive.
Yeah, and if you want to interact with any sort of like useful financial tool, we're talking about hundreds of dollars. So it really prices out the average user from using it right now. But similar to the proof of work to proof of stake, there are a lot of Ethereum scaling solutions that are on the horizon. This is a problem of bandwidth. You think of like AOL days. Speed of the internet at that point was abysmal. Now, you don't even think about streaming 10 movies, whatever. We're not there yet with a blockchain. Like, it's going to take some time to scale Ethereum, but there's a lot that's being worked on there.
So Ethereum's still on dial. It's like that dial up to DSL kind of analogy. Ethereum's still on dial up, and DSL is coming. We just need a few more years to finish up the dev cycle and come up with a few new ideas.
Yeah, and it's like there are short, medium, and long-term solutions to the gas problem. Short-term, there's an Ethereum improvement proposal. It's called EIP 1559 that totally changes the fee market for gas. There is this technology called rollups that sort of allows you to compress a bunch of transactions into a single transaction. So there's stuff that's sort of on the horizon. My understanding is EIP 559 should be in the next month or so at this point. Don't know exactly what the latest was, but so anyway,
cool. So we'll move around some of our lightning questions here for the sake of time. Kevin, I keep hearing this term DApp or DApp in relation to Ethereum. What's this word all about, and what is the actual pronunciation? Am I just transposing my iPhone lingo onto this thing, or what's going on with these DApps?
iOS, yeah. Yeah, so the way I've heard it pronounced is DApp. It stands for Decentralized Application. It's not a word I hear as often anymore, but it's just this general idea of an Ethereum-based application or a blockchain-based application that you can write and make it do whatever you want. So right now, that is almost primarily functionality relating to money, so like DeFi, financial applications, and maybe in the future, as we do begin to scale blockchains like Ethereum, we will see a lot more interesting things as the cost of using it becomes less and less prohibitive. So for now, most apps are financial protocols, money protocols.
So before, in a past episode, we teased that idea of what makes all this blockchain stuff interesting. We threw out that example of Uber. What if there were a rideshare app where it was just riders, drivers, and a smart contract in the middle? No Uber or Lyft to mix in their politics or put their hand in the pot or get caught into legal battles where they have to change the pricing structure up. We're not there yet in terms of execution, but that would be a form of a DApp in the context of what we're talking about, right? Is that like a use case kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was one decentralized alternative to Uber that was kind of floating around in Austin for a while. I'm blanking on the name of it, but yeah, ultimately, a lot of those sort of more lofty ideas, we're not totally there yet. When it costs this much money to use the network, it's you need really financially dense use cases right now, if that makes sense. Just moving larger amounts of money.
It's got to have high margins to be able to pay for the gas for it to work right now. These small margin type operations are just impractical at the moment.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's a good one to leave it on.
Okay, very good. Well, that is Ethereum, folks. Again, a big rabbit hole here. We appreciate you for staying with us so far, and there is so much more to come. I think in the next episode, we're going to talk custody a little bit, ownership of these actual coins, the tangible, intangible. Where do they go? Do you put them in your wallet? Does your computer have a wallet? I didn't know my computer had a pocket. We're going to talk about that coming up on the next one. Folks, remember to find us on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes, most of the other places you'd find podcasts as well. We should have some updated graphics coming in the next episodes, but thank you so much for joining us so far for the new blocks. It's been a pleasure, and we'll be back again.
Yep. As usual, none of this is financial advice.
Yes.
You know the deal.
You know the deal. Disclaimers, though. This is all in the name of education, just trying to get the good word of this innovative technology out there. So have a good week, and we'll see you next time.